Tighten your lines as we get ready to sail the seven seas on the Political Pirate Podcast. Join Captain Ted Yoho and the salty dog John Martin as they search far and wide for the greatest treasure of all, the truth. From local Florida news to nationwide stories and the globe beyond, we've got it all mapped out. Now here's your hosts, the salty dog John Martin and Captain Ted Yoho.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Three Ps, the Political Pirate Podcast, featuring yours truly, the old salty dog, and the John Martin, and the captain of our pirate ship, once again from an undisclosed location in the Keys, none other than Ted Yoho. Good morning, my friend.
Good morning, John. How are you, buddy? You looking mighty good there, like you're probably ready to go fishing or something.
As soon as this show is over, man, I got to say, I'm going to be burning rubber, getting out of Hawthorne.
I don't blame you. I'm still here in the fabulous Florida Keys, and my son's coming down, and I think one of my daughters is coming down this weekend. So,
well, I can tell without even asking, you believe the same way I do, in a sense that, yeah, I'm concerned about what's happening in the country. I want things to go right. I want to save America, but in the meantime, I'm still going to fish. You know what I mean? I'm going to enjoy the freedoms that people sacrifice to give me. That's exactly what I'm going to do.
You know what that is? I don't think I shared this with you. Carolyn and I were in Europe, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, and we're in London, and just beautiful waterways over there. And we went up to Scotland, beautiful waterways. And I asked some people, I said, I don't see any boats on your water. And they says, well, we can't afford it. I says, what's it, the price of diesel? And he goes, oh, no, it's not the diesel. He says, you have to pay a user fee of $5,000 a year to be able to boat. I said, a user fee? Can you imagine that if we had to do that in the States?
It's incredible, man. Well, it could come to that, and we're going to talk about it.
Well, you know, it could. If you get the Democrats in charge, look at what they've done in these other states that they have run into bankruptcy. The mayor of Detroit said that they're unsustainable. They can't go on. And
it's come out now. The mayor of Chicago himself hadn't talked about it, but everybody else is talking about it. Chicago is running on fumes right now, apparently.
They really are.
But anyway, the mayor up there, you know, he don't have time to talk about that. But let's talk about what's real, something that's happening that is really generating a lot of excitement from people who are just everyday average Americans, but of course the protest crowd. And that is what's happening in our nation's capital with the crackdown there, as I like to call it. But Politico, of all publications, I use a lot of different publications. They've got an interesting article I'm going to use as a template, Ted. It says D.C. police to increase cooperation with immigration enforcement amid Trump crackdown. So what they're saying, let me read you this one part, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Ted. Officers in Washington's Metropolitan Police Department can now assist federal immigration authorities. Police Chief Pamela A. Smith wrote in an order Thursday, a turning point, they say, for the liberal-leaning city government that comes as President Trump continues to flex federal control of the city. So now the police department, led by their own police chief, who is I just say she's a black female liberal Democrat, but she's a police officer, and she is cooperating with federal authorities. What are your thoughts on that, Ted?
Well, number one, I think it's time for a change. It needed to happen up there. And I think that the head of the police force, I think she saw the need for help. And she's there to uphold the law. And that has become an unruly city. I mean, when I go up there, you're told don't walk on the streets at night. You know, people getting hijacked. If you look back over the course of the last 3 or 4, 5 years, say, even when I was up there, which was 2013 to 2021, excuse me, during that time, there were carjackings, there were people being shot, people being robbed. There were members of Congress this was happening to, along with regular everyday citizens. So there was no random selection of who got criminalized. And this is something that's escalated. And then you see these young gangs that think they're immune from the law because they're 13, 14, 15 years of age. And for Marion Bowser, who is the active mayor up there now, it's a disgrace, John. When you go through there, there's a section that goes into the welfare area offices. I've been in Africa and some of the poorest parts of Africa. It didn't look much different. People on the side of the streets just hanging out, trash everywhere in our nation's capital. And I think Trump's attitude about this should be the bellwether, or the symbol of what America is, and it's kind of a disgrace right now. You've got all those beautiful monuments that have been there for hundreds or over 100 years, and it's something we should relish and just really make an example of what America stands for. Washington, D.C. right now is not a city that you want to promote.
Well, you mentioned those beautiful monuments, and certainly they are. Washington is a spectacular city, man. But, Chuck Schumer came out the other day and says, oh, this is all nonsense. He says, I feel perfectly safe. I get up before the sun rises every morning and walk through the monuments and all when the sun's rising, and I feel safe, perfectly safe. And what he forgets to tell you, if the story's even true, is that he's being followed by a couple of black Suburbans with a squad of officers around him that are heavily armed at all times because he's the minority leader. Of course he feels safe.
Sure.
It's ridiculous.
And I hope he does do that. I hope he gets up and walks through those monuments as a constant reminder of what he's in charge, what he's tasked to protect. And there's this whole thing from the Democrats, our democracy is being destroyed, our democracy is under threat. No, it was under threat by the Democrat leaders of the past 4 years, and then Obama, who wanted to fundamentally transform America and almost succeeded.
Yeah, well, the thing about Chuck Schumer, when I don't have the video up, but I've played it before, he doesn't even know how to cook a hamburger, man. You ever seen that? He's got a raw hamburger and he puts cheese on top of it. And he's
they ought to put him and Elizabeth Warren together. He can cook the raw hamburger and she can go, I am going to drink this here beer.
Yeah. I mean, they're so fake. It's unbelievable, man. I mean, it's crazy. But let me read you the next part of this article right here. The district's officers, talking about D.C. officers, police officers, will be empowered to share information with immigration agencies about people at traffic stops and to transport agency employees and their detainees per the order. Now, Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, on Thursday called the order a game changer. Let me just say this, and then I'll turn it back to you, Ted. The fact that this is, and I'm not denying what she's saying, but the fact that it's a game changer that police officers would be allowed to share information with ICE agents and everything else, that tells you where we're at right now. That's a game changer. That should just be a matter of fact. It's just crazy.
You know, it is. And if we're all on the same page, we're all on the same team, this shouldn't be a disagreement, an issue with contention. We're all here for the protection of America, American citizens. And I can't think of a stronger place to do that in our nation's capital that represents a constitutional republic. And, that there's this dichotomy between the left and the right is just crazy. The right, the pro-republic people, they want to maintain this country and the rule of law. The other side makes every excuse they can come up with of why this is such a racist country and how this push on immigration is a racist move. No, it's national security. And until they get their act together, let's hope they never get into power. And I think this is going to be interesting watching the race in New York City. What happens if Zohran Mamdani, if he wins that race, you watch the decline of New York. And I will predict it'll be faster than L.A.
Well, I don't know if you've seen this, but the reports out today, and Mamdani has actually acknowledged it, and that Barack Obama, now he has not endorsed, I just say it, he's not endorsed him, but it's been let known that they've had a phone conversation. Right. And Mamdani actually said that, Obama encouraged him about how to campaign and stuff like that. It might as well be an endorsement, really. I mean,
it really should be.
I mean, that's what they're doing. They're trying to endorse without endorsing. That's pretty obvious.
Well, two things on that.
He's going to win, Ted.
Obama is looking for relevance. His legacy of fundamentally transforming America is disappearing. And the attacks going after him about the investigations he did with against Trump, the conspiracy and all that, those are going to come down hard on him and destroy his legacy that much more. And so he's trying to find relevance in propping up a candidate that really doesn't need his propping up. In fact, it may do more harm to Zidani or Mandani than helping him, because he's lost his political clout being Obama. And so it'll be interesting how this plays out. And again, if he wins, it just shows you how radically changed the Democrat of your dad's era has changed to the liberal, progressive, Marxist, communist mindset of them today.
Well, they're trying to make all of this stuff about like DC and all these other cities racist. They all talk about now that that Trump only goes after cities with black mayors in it. I mean, give me a break, man. The reverse, if you think about it, if that's true, and I'm not saying it is, but if true, then what about the reverse side of that? Are you saying that every city that it's going to hell just happens to have a black mayor? I mean, I don't think it has anything to do with color. It has to do with progressive liberalism that is not working, and socialism and communism and all that stuff shaken up in one of those hourglass things.
It really
That's
is.
the problem. It's got nothing to do with color.
You've got that video clip coming up, and I forget who's on there, but I saw Al Sharpton on there, and right there, it's all race baiting. But look at what happened to the white judge in Texas that was protecting the illegal. They went after her. She got arrested. She's probably going to lose her judgeship, which she needs to. You look at that mayor up in Newark or New Jersey that was protecting the illegals. They went after him. And so for them to say it's just the black areas, I mean, that's just totally race baiting. It's non-founded, and it's a lie. And people need to realize they're lying to the American people, and it's all for political gain. And it's just a bunch of BS, John.
Yeah, well, even here in the state of Florida, the governor with the kind of Doge thing that the state of Florida is doing, they're all wrapped up here in Alachua County. And if you look at our county and city commission in Gainesville, it's pretty much there's a couple of black people on there, but the mayor is white. All of that. It has nothing to do with color. It has to do with the policy, the failed policy, and making America great again and putting America first. And it starts with our cities. It starts with our cities, to me.
Good point. You brought that up. I mean, all politics comes down to local. I mean, it should start with our cities, our communities, and move up to the state levels. And we should be the guards of our freedoms at the local level and let that escalate up by the people we elect. And that's why we're here to educate, activate, motivate, and activate people.
Yeah, well, not to get too far off track, but here in Florida, it appears, and it's got quite a bit of time left to go. But if I was going to place a bet in Las Vegas, I would bet that Byron Donaldson's going to be the next governor of the state of Florida. And last time I checked, I think he's a black man. I don't know. And he's a Republican, so, and he's got the support of Donald Trump. So the racist Donald Trump, is supporting a black man to be the mayor of his home state now. It's just insane
to see how that happens, and again, that won't shut up the race baiters out there. They'll say, oh, he's really an Uncle Tom. He's not really black. They'll come out and say garbage like that. Because they just can't stand people winning on merit.
Well, I think I may have shared this story with you before, but just to show you how crazy it can get, a few moons ago, I was doing one of my live coverages of a event where Don Jr. and Emma Gilforth, whatever her name, and they were a couple.
Kimberly,
they were speaking. Yeah, Kimberly. They were speaking at UF. And of course, they had a big protest outside, sure. And Charlie Kirk, who was Turning Point USA, happened to be there. And him and I ended up like on a little hill together, side by side, being shouted out by all these protesters, right? And this group of, I didn't have anything that said Trump on me or anything. I just had a camera. This group of women, mostly black women, came around me and started shouting at me. And I started trying to talk to them. And they said, well, "You're a racist. You're a racist." And I said, check this out. I said, well, that would be news to my wife because she happens to be black. And they said, well, she's a racist too. So, it's just, it just
John,
gets crazy.
You can't fix stupid.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned this video. Let's get back to it. Now, this we're talking about, in case you're just tuning in, we're talking about the Trump taking over the police operations, essentially, and law enforcement, among other things, in D.C. for the next 30 days. Chris Matthews, Captain Tingle, I know you love that guy, man.
Yeah.
Chris Matthews was on MSNBC with Mika Brzezinski, and he talks about what's happening. And it's very interesting what he has to say, and Mika agrees with him. Let's play this, and we'll come back and talk about it.
Sure.
It's fascinating to me.
Crime is down, but the murder rate's up. To the average person, the murder rate's about life and death. You don't brag about a rising murder rate. And the Democrats are, I agree with you, Mika, they're falling into the trap of defending what's indefensible.
It's a trap. Yes, it's a trap. I mean, if it's not a winner politically to say, oh, you're wrong, look at the data. Because, if one violent crime happens in a very heavily populated part of the city, people hear about it, and it's visceral. They don't want it. And they'll gravitate.
I mean, with that panel of people, it's hard to believe that they had a lick of common sense. But Chris Matthews makes a pretty good point there. Now, he's hammering Trump, and I'm not saying he's in favor of them being in D.C., but he says it's a trap, that the Democrats are falling into a trap attacking this issue. And Mika, of all people, agrees with him. Is it a trap, Ted? What do you think about that?
No, I think, they are. They're arguing on the wrong issue. I mean, they're arguing about rule of law and the safety of citizens. And D.C. has failed in this. John, when I lived up there, even today when I go up once a month, there's tent encampments, and the city has empowered them. They put out porta-johns right there. And instead of saying you can't camp here, we've got public housing. We've got all these social programs. You need to take advantage of them, but you are not living on our streets in our capital or any city, really. In Gainesville, you're talking about Gainesville. Gainesville's terrible about this. And we've got a homeless problem, and we need to put more money in it. And that's what Trump wants to do. He started out there in L.A. and California and San Francisco. And that's where we really need to put the effort, because the other things these cities are doing are treating a symptom. They're not treating the underlying cause.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned Gainesville. Gainesville now, I don't know about the statistics, but at least, I watch TV 20 News occasionally, our local ABC affiliate here, and they basically cover Lake City, Gainesville, and Ocala. And you can, even 4 or 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago, you could watch it and you never heard hardly, it might be once or twice a year you hear about somebody getting shot. But now between Lake City, Gainesville, and Ocala, it's every single night on the news, someone is shot in the streets of these three towns, pretty much every night.
And I would bet these are probably not your law-abiding citizens. It's people that have, the way the legal system has gotten to be a revolving door in so many of these towns and these liberal prosecutors, it's just a revolving door, and it needs to come to an end. The American people are fed up with it, and that's why you saw the election go the way it went. Was Trump the perfect candidate? He's not the perfect person, but maybe he was the perfect candidate for this time in our nation's history, and that's why he won so big, and he's doing so well.
Well, they call Trump the trapper. Well, the roles have clearly changed since Donald Trump's been in there, because Trump, I don't know if he's a trapper, but he's the hunter now. I don't know if you've seen this picture or not, but I love this meme. I was the hunted, now I'm the hunter, because it's really becoming true.
Talk about the tide turning, and the table turning over. I mean, he really has done that. And that goes back to his stamina, his fight to be successful. And he doesn't give up. He is the fighter. He is the man in the arena that Theodore Roosevelt talked about. And, I've got so much respect for anybody that can go through the adversity that he goes through, that he doesn't have to. But he does it for the cause, and that cause is this country.
Well, Ted, here's the way I see it about Donald Trump. This is not in any way a knock on Donald Trump at all, because I'm obviously a supporter of his. But Donald Trump is a product, if you will, of the fact that he's president of what started kind of under Obama and what went to a head for the second term now of Trump with Joe Biden. It was the frustration of Americans because, people like you and me probably supported Trump from the beginning. I know I did. You may or may not have, but I have. But the reason why the country in general came around him, especially in this second term, is because of what's happening with the progressive leftist rule of the country. They drove people to Donald Trump, the way I see it.
No, you're absolutely right. And he wasn't my first or second choice. He was my third choice and the only choice because it was between him and Hillary. And you hit the nail on the head when you said he is a symptom of the underlying cause. Donald Trump is not the problem in this country from the left standpoint. He is a symptom of the underlying cause of what brought it in, say, the Tea Party movement. They were fed up with what was going on in government, the things they weren't fixing. They were fed up with the lies. They were fed up with all the fakeness out there. You couldn't believe anything. You look at, I think in one of these segments you have, or one I read earlier today, how they lambasted Trump for siding with Putin, going against the intelligence agencies on Russian collusion. And our intelligence agency all came out and said that there was Russian collusion, and Trump said there wasn't. And then here we are today where we knew this was all fabricated. So his instincts are right. And that's why people go to him, because, he sticks on his convictions and he's usually right on that. And, the left, let's just hope they keep going down the drain as it gets closer to the bottom of the drain, and that whirlpool sucks them all in there. And we get back to some normalcy if that's possible.
Yeah. Well, we're going to come back in just a moment here and pick up on this. But right now, we're going to take a quick commercial break. If you want to be a sponsor of our show, look at the little tagline you see occasionally on the screen saying "Contact Freddie." We'd love to have you. And please support our sponsors. And Ted, we'll be right back.
All right.
Although the owner of Lewis Oil Company maintains she is 29, Lewis Oil turns 60 years old in June. Chevron would like to recognize the North Florida second-generation family-owned business, celebrating its growth and staying power. Lewis Oil Company maintains significant on-hand supplies, strategically located fuel depots, a delivery fleet, on-site service, fuel card locks, and convenience stores. Lewis Oil Company understands its responsibility in the local economy by providing service and delivery on demand and in crisis. As a first responder for 18 Florida counties and the Southeast from Texas to Virginia, we are proud of this rare accomplishment. Lewis Oil delivers.
This is Ward Scott, and I want to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. The Ward Scott Files premium sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care.
Meldon Law, the only official injury partner of the Florida Gators.
The Ward Scott Files Gold sponsors are Lewis Oil Company,
Shoot GTR,
On the Spot Dry Cleaners, R&R Construction, and Style Cuts. If you are interested in promoting your business on the show, you can visit our website, www.wardscottfiles.com, and click on the Advertise Here banner on the right side of the page, or call my friend Freddie at 352-284-3733. Again, thank you to all the great businesses that support the Ward Scott Files. And remember, if you like the show, thank our sponsors and support the businesses that support us.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. May God have mercy on your soul.
Or that very much surprises me that you've never been tased.
You can't handle the truth!
All bees poop.
A warthog. He's going to come up the steps. Here he comes. Oh my goodness, and he's huge. Hello, boy. Wonder if we can pet him. Hi, boy.
Can we touch him? No, don't.
Help me! Help! Help!
Welcome back to the 3Ps, the Political Pirate Podcast, with your host, the old salty dog, John Martin, and the captain of our pirate ship, Ted Yoho. Well, Ted, when we went to break, we were talking about the police action, if you will, I hate to say takeover because it's not really, that's too much, but Donald Trump's actions in D.C., using his constitutional authority to basically crack down and clean it up. And, one other thing we were talking about a little bit, and this is my words, not anybody else's, but the left, and I'm going to show you some videos that prove it, is really becoming, for lack of a better word, they're becoming just a-holes. They really are. I mean, they just attack people. But here's a video, Ted, of a man attacking in a very unique way one of the police officers in D.C. during this crackdown. And we're going to play this and we'll come back and talk about it. Let me give that old boy a little tip here, Ted. If you're a white dude and you can't run, don't be throwing stuff at the cops, man. I mean, the dude can't run at all, man. But there you got a guy. Turns out this guy actually works for the Department of Justice, Ted, and has been fired, and we'll get into that in a minute. But here's a guy hollering at the police officer and then throws like a Subway sandwich in the guy's face. It's insane.
It really is. And it shows you the lack of respect for the police and the lack of respect for the rule of law. This was a kid that was obviously coddled his whole life. He comes up there and his feelings are hurt because Trump wants to federalize the police force up there. Trump has every right to do that. D.C., they're pushing for statehood again, and that'll never stop. D.C. doesn't need to be a state. It's an administrative area that was set up that way by our founding fathers. And so this shows you the wisdom they had 250 plus years ago of how to set up a city so it doesn't get tainted by politics. And let's hope and pray that we can keep it a district and not a state. Because if it's a state, the Democrats are only doing this to get power and to get control again, period.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that about statehood, because check this out. If D.C. were to become a state, if they were a state, do you realize that their murder rate would then make them the murder capital of the United States as far as states? They would have the highest murder rate of any state in the nation if they were.
Is that right? Per population?
Yeah.
I did not
realize. Unbelievable. Think about that. I mean, they're saying they want to be a state and there's no crime here, but if they were a state, their stats would put them at the top.
Wow.
DC, you're safer, just to put it in perspective, you're safer walking the streets of Bogota, Colombia, or Mexico City than you are in DC.
Yeah, well, that's why a lot of the countries are saying don't travel to the U.S. or to DC for those reasons. And, it's a shame. And you know what's really bad, John, and it's heartbreaking to a point, is that the Democrats, they're enraged that he's bringing law and order to that area because it is a failed administrative area. All you have to do is drive through there. And like I told you before, when I saw those encampments and I saw them down by our federal buildings, and I swear it looked like a street in Africa that I drove through that was just kind of a slum area. And I'm like, how can this happen in our nation's capital? Well, it's because of the lack of rule of law. And really, for lack of
I think when you say the Democrats, I want people to know, at least from my perspective, that we're talking, I think, mostly about the leaders of the Democratic Party. Because I bet you, I'd be willing to bet money if you talk to the average resident in D.C., because I don't put those protesters, most of the guys are being paid and stuff. The average protester in D.C., I mean, not protest, citizen in D.C. is probably like, I don't like Donald Trump, but I don't, feel very safe here in D.C., if they were honest. There
I might disagree with that a little bit because I've been there and you can just sense it when you're up there. There's an attitude that if you're anything on the right, that they have a disdain for you. And it's palpable. You can really feel that up there. I mean, you just look at what they've said. What was it? 95% of the people will not support what Trump does. These are people in the government. Then you look at the restaurants and the things that they said, well, we're going to spit in the food and just not take the orders of people that are on the Republican side. And you go back to our great friend Maxine Waters when Trump was in there in the first term, saying if anybody from an administration comes into your restaurant, you get in their face, you throw stuff in their face, and just, I mean, the hatred and the vitriol coming out of them. That's why they're in the state they are now, not just Washington, but the Democratic Party.
Well, the best solution for that I've found is I drive an old beat up pickup truck with a Trump sticker on it, and no one ever accosts me at the gas station. They just don't. But we showed you this video. I want to play another one here. They showed you this video of the guy throwing the Subway sandwich at the cop and what happened to him. I want to now play Judge Jeanine Pirro, who is now the judge, basically a federal judge in the D.C. district. I wanted to play what she had to say about it. Check this out, Ted, and we'll come back and talk about it.
Again. And as part of his effort to fight crime, he's bringing in our federal law enforcement partners like FBI, ATF, DEA, Park Police, everybody to help the Metropolitan PD fight crime. And the president's message to the criminals was, if you spit, we hit. Well, we didn't quite do that the other night when an individual went up to one of the federal law enforcement officers and started jumping up and down, screaming at him, berating him, yelling at him. And then he took a Subway sandwich about this big and took it and threw it at the officer. He thought it was funny. Well, he doesn't think it's funny today because we charged him with a felony, assault on a police officer. And we're going to back the police to the hilt. So there. Stick your Subway sandwich somewhere else. So President Trump.
Stick it where the sun don't shine. I will translate what the judge said there. I mean, there are times they are definitely a changing. And I got a meme I want to put up for you too before we get into talking about it, because there is a new squad. The squad, Donald Trump, if we can put it up there in a minute, has his own squad. Now, there you go. There's the Trump squad right there, and Jeanine Pirro is it. But what did you think about what the judge said, Ted?
Thought it was apropos. I thought it was very good, and I'm glad to see her in there and part of the squad. And it's funny because if you go back to Mark Cuban, who said Trump only aligns himself with dumb women, you look at these four women, that's a pretty good team to have. It's a good squad to have on your side. It is amazing.
Yeah, I actually had, you might have been at the event where she spoke to the Black Tie and Blue Jeans judge a few years back, and I got to meet her and talk to her. I'm not saying she'd remember me from Adam, but she's the real deal. She comes across exactly like you see her on TV.
Yeah, she would remember you. You're the salty dog, buddy.
Well, there was a little incident that she'd probably remember, because I came in there and it was before she was getting ready to talk to the little gathering of people before the main speech. And I went and opened up the men's bathroom and walked in there, and she was in there in front of the mirror. Because the women's was full and they were letting her use that. She was clothed, of course, but she was doing makeup, and she kind of looked at me and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry," and everything. She said, "Don't worry about it." So yes, she might remember that I walked in on her while she was doing her makeup. It's kind of funny. But so we'll conclude with this, Ted. Donald Trump, the way the law is, he can do what he's doing in D.C. for 30 days. He's about 10 days into it. After that, Congress has to go through some process to approve an extension. What, if any, predictions do you have about what's going to happen after this 30 days? Do you think they'll try to extend it, or what? How do you see it?
Yeah, I think they'll try to extend it, but I think you'll see the votes mainly along party lines. Now, there's a couple members of Congress that are up there in the Democrat side that were carjacked, that were robbed. And so it'd be interesting to see how they vote. Again, you know, because they were victims up there. I mean, they got some serious damage to them. And, you know, this again, it's something that needs to happen. There's a breakdown of rule of law, and I would hope they would extend this.
Well, Ted, you know, and I've said this about a lot of issues, but I think this one's right at the top on that. What the Democrats are really afraid of, because most of them really, you know, like you said, they've been carjacked. You know, they don't feel safe and stuff like that up there. They're just anti-Trump. But what they're really terrified of is it'll actually work. They're terrified that what Trump is doing will actually work. That's what scares them the most, in my opinion.
Well, that goes back to the video.
Carjacking.
That goes back to the video of Chris Matthews. I mean, he was saying that you're on the wrong side of this. You know, you're arguing the wrong thing, and you know, they're taking the wrong stance. And again, that was a resounding voice of the American people that said they were way off base in the last elections. And we're going into the midterms coming up next year. It'll be interesting to see how it flips. You know, if the Republicans garner more support in the different districts and the different states, I mean, that's a resounding message that the American people like what's going on. And it's to get us back to a rule of law and some normalcy, you know, the new normal, I guess you could call them, and rejecting what they had allowed to happen in this country. I mean, it was a crime of what they were doing.
Yeah, I saw that CNN guy that's kind of becoming famous for statistical analysis and stuff like that. And he pointed out that when Biden was president, that his polling numbers, approval rating on crime was negative, like 26 or 27% negative. And Donald Trump's right now is a +1. So you're talking about, you know, just an incredible gap there. So the Democrats do need to be afraid of that trap, because that's what that. And when I was talking about earlier, I don't disagree with you about the attitude in general. But what I'm saying is, I think the common everyday citizen in not going to be for the right at all. But they don't feel safe in D.C. is what I'm trying to say.
Well, you know what? You brought up a good point there. And I was thinking about this on going through some of the notes. The average American, correct me if you think I'm wrong, they just want to live their life. They want an income. They want a roof over their head. They want security. They want a better life for their family. They want to be able to go out, like you said, and enjoy fishing and being able to do those things we do in this country. I think that's the sentiment of most people. It's when you get into politics and you start putting one side against the other is where that divide comes. We need somebody that's going to bring people together and heal this nation and become, again, the United States of America.
Well, it reminds me of that video we played a few months ago where it was a young black woman, and she was in New York City, and she was trying to get to work. And these protesters stopped her, who happened to be white, and the purple hair and all that. And she said, "I'm just trying to get to work. I'm trying to work for my kids." And the guy literally said, "Work?" and just started laughing at her. I mean, but the Democrats, let's get into this, Ted, a minute. The Democrats are getting crazier by the minute, really and truly, especially the leadership of the party. I want to play you this video, and this is Robert Francis, otherwise known as Beto O'Rourke, and he tells you what he thinks about law and order in this video. Check this out, Ted, and we'll come back and talk about it.
Are you with me on that? Andale. It also means, as Mark was saying earlier, we don't await the punch thrown by these would-be fascists to land. We punch first, and we punch harder. We want California and New Jersey and Illinois and Maryland and every other state where the Democrats hold the governor's mansion, the assembly, and the state senate to redraw their congressional districts now, not wait for Texas to move first, to maximize Democratic Party advantage. Listen, You may say to yourself, well, those aren't the rules. There are no refs in this game. Fuck the rules. We are going to win whatever it takes. We're going to take this to them in every way that we can.
I think Beto O'Rourke there kind of sums it up. They don't care about the rules. They don't care about law and order. They only care about power. That's it. And I think Beto O'Rourke is pretty representative of the Democratic leadership right now.
He really is. He came in with me in 2013, and he's a nice guy. I mean, to talk to him, but his politics are all wrong, John. And he's been running to be somebody since he left Congress. You know, he ran to be the senator against Cruz, did that twice. He was in the presidential race for a short period of time, lost that. Well, he never got beyond the stage to really run. And here he is. Now they're saying, what are you going to do? And he goes, well, I may seek a statewide office. Well, you don't go to Oklahoma and Nebraska and around the country for a statewide office. He's laying the groundwork to run for president. And I think he's envious of AOC getting all the credit when he probably thinks he's a lot smarter. You know, and his wife comes from a billionaire family. So he's an oligarch and wants to be in power. And it's anything he can say derogatory against the Republican and especially Trump. And just to get the fanfare, they say these ridiculous things. I mean, he goes on a rant using all the curse words that you've seen so many of the Democrats do that is not working for them. So, you know, I applaud them. Keep doing it. You guys are doing great.
Yeah, well, I tell you that it's coming clearer and clearer to me, Ted, that Democrats really have no ideas except F Donald Trump. That's it. That's their entire political message.
Anger and hatred.
There's no message of a solution.
There really isn't. And it's just, they're spoilers because they just don't understand why they lost. They can't accept why they lost. And so they're going to be out there to break the system down, which is really what they want, especially when you get into the representatives like Ilhan Omar or Tlaib. They want to tear down the country, kind of like Zoran Mandani. He just doesn't see it as a constitutional republic. And what's really sad is that people don't understand those founding principles. Yeah, there are a bunch of old white guys, there are a lot of young white guys too. Those principles are universal. And that's why that has spread around the world of forming liberal democracies and constitutional republics, because it works and it's the best thing for freedom and liberty for the individual. Bar none.
Well, you keep hearing these leaders from Maxine Waters to Gavin Newsom to now the mayor of Chicago. They keep saying that the Trump people, the Republicans, want a civil war, which is totally ridiculous. But let me you talked about Madani. Let's mention this. He says that he wants to be Trump's worst nightmare. So he's trying to turn it in that. Listen to this now, Ted. So Democratic socialist and Minneapolis mayoral hopeful Omar Fatah, he says his first priority if he gets elected to be the mayor of Minneapolis, and he's running against another Democrat, would be protecting illegal immigrants from President Donald Trump's hostile federal government. So his first priority as a mayor of a major city in the United States is not to serve the citizens of his city and America, but to protect illegal immigrants. That's his top priority.
You know, they're just throwing manure against the wall to see what sticks. I mean, it comes down to the hatred, to the anger, to these phrases that they're saying, you know, Trump's a Nazi. It only took Hitler 49 or 59 days to take over Germany and ruin their democracy and put in Nazism. Hopeful mayor of Minneapolis, I mean, give me a break. You know, he's going to run to protect the illegal people from the hostile takeover. No, it's the rule of law. And, you know, I was born in Minnesota, happily left when I was a young fella, and God transplanted me to Florida where it's 70 and above most of the time. And it's a shame to see what's happened to that state. It was such a great state, you know, the values and all that, just hometown America, but it's changed and it'll continue to change. But for them to elect somebody, even a candidate that's running on, I'm going to do what I can to protect the illegals here from Donald Trump, that's a platform.
First priority. Number one
First priority. By God, run on that. And if it works, well, Minnesota's going to go the way of New York, California, and all those other ones. One last thing. Madani was saying he's going to be Trump's worst nightmare. I want to correct that. He is going to be New York City's worst nightmare.
Well, as a good friend of mine, he's extremely conservative. I'm going to let him remain anonymous. You actually know him. But I remember, I'll never forget one time he told me, he's very active in local politics, that talking about Alachua County and the roads at the time. But he made a point that he said, John, it's probably going to have to get a lot worse before it gets better. He said a lot worse to wake people up, and then it may be too late. But I think he's right about that, and that's the one thing. I don't want Madani to be mayor of New York. I don't. But if he is, it might actually trigger people to wake up and man the political ramparts like I was.
There's a lot of truth in that. When I got elected my first term, there was somebody in Gainesville, and you know him, and it was Obama's second election coming up. And he goes, I hope Obama wins again. I said, you got to be kidding me. He goes, no. He goes, Ted, people aren't hurting enough. And it reminds me of the story of the dog laying on the nail. I'm glad you asked me what was that about. There's this dog laying on a nail on the porch. And this farmer comes by, and he steps up on the porch, and the dog gives out this blood-curdling cry, like that. The guy jumps, and the old farmer's just rocking in the chair, and he goes to leave. He steps on that same board, hits the dog cries again, and he looks at the farmer. He goes, what's wrong with your dog? He goes, nothing. He's just laying on a nail. Well, why doesn't he get up and move? Well, it doesn't hurt him bad enough to do anything about it. Just hurts him bad enough to cry.
I hear you, man.
And when it hurts bad enough to do something, it'll change.
Yeah, maybe like that pot, and the frog in the pot where it's simmering. Exactly. Maybe it just has to get to the boiling point instantly to make people jump the heck out. But we got a few minutes left, and I want to cover a topic. We talked a good bit about it. I'm sure we'll talk about it more on Monday. Sure. But later today, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin are meeting in Alaska. It'll be 11:30 Alaska time, 3:30 Eastern time. I'll probably be offshore when they meet. But they're going to have a press conference afterwards, depending on how things go. But what do you think about what is likely to happen? What are your general thoughts on this?
Well, number one, if you're offshore when they meet, watch out for the mushroom clouds.
Yeah. Well, you know what they say when they see the mushroom clouds, you can look at it and go, well, the heck with the limit. Go ahead, Ted.
I don't know what to think about this. When you start a meeting off and say, well, I think there's less than 25% success in this meeting, I wouldn't broadcast that.
He says that he might be out of there in 3 to 5 minutes too.
He might be. And I just think this whole thing's a debacle. That, number one, why is Trump meeting with Putin? They're not on our doorstep. Yes, we supported Ukraine. We support NATO. But again, my argument is this should be NATO meeting, the NATO nations meeting with Putin en masse, and we can be there showing him the clout that they're tired of this. And so if you read what Putin says, he is not going to cede any territory. He's not going to agree to demilitarizing. He wants to take all of Ukraine. Those are his goals. And he wants Zelensky gone. He wants to delegitimize their government so they can put in their illegitimate government that he runs under in Russia. He wants to take control of that. And so it's going to be interesting how this turns out. I think it's going to be a nothing meeting. I think there's going to be rhetoric. But I think at the end, the only thing that he's going to understand is force. And this is where NATO ought to come in collectively and put sanctions on them across the board. That would carry a lot more clout, and I think it would represent a stronger hand, and it would keep us from being the player against Russia. And I think that's a very dangerous step, because if this doesn't work out, what is that? That's going to involve Trump wanting to do more unilaterally instead of collectively working with NATO. and coming in there as a collective force of significant pressure on Putin. I think that would be the best thing.
Well, the scariest thing to me about it, and I'm not opposed to what I'm about to say, is the only real teeth we have is some type of economic sanctions in general that hit the oil, because Russia's total economy is based on oil essentially right now. And when I say it scares me, we talk about Hitler. They mention Hitler all the time. Bottom line, for why Hitler was able to do what he did and rise to power, like you said, is because Germany, for various reasons, was under total economic collapse. And there was a saying that, you had to take a wheelbarrow load of marks to the market to buy a loaf of bread, which is true. Their inflation rate was like 4,000%. So desperate situations create desperate solutions. And so, it's a tricky situation, because in order to get Putin to turn, you're going to probably have to bring Russia close to collapse. And if they actually do collapse, what comes out of that? So, it's tough, and we're just going to have to wait and see. But economic pressure is really, military pressure is part of it. But I think the economic pressure is the only thing that's really going to potentially swing Putin.
Right. And looking at this meeting, this summit, it's not going to be a Reagan Gorbachev type of meeting. I think there's going to be some fanfare trying to make it look like that. But Reagan had resolve. He knew exactly what he wanted, and he wasn't going to back up on that. I don't know if Trump knows exactly what he wants. He wants the killing to stop. Putin doesn't care about that. What is it that's going to make Putin come to the table? And I think you brought it up. It's economic sanctions. It's coming down hard. In fact, I wouldn't have had the meeting if I were the president. I would put the sanctions. I would make it so painful for him. He's asking for relief. That's what happened with Germany, and that's what happened with Japan. It was so painful for them to continue. They came to the peace table, and look at them today. They're our largest trading partners, some of our largest trading partners. And, you're going to have to change the whole dynamics of Russia, because if he comes to the table, it's still a communist regime, even though they don't claim communism. It's a communist regime, authoritarian regime.
Well, Putin, being the former head of the KGB and now the president essentially for life, basically, if you look at history, or say history repeats itself, or a predictor, generally in Russia, the Russians themselves, their internal group, when they get, they take the leader out themselves at some point. And Putin knows that. So he's trying to balance stuff at home too, because his greatest threat is probably internally, even though I'm not saying he's under that threat now, but that's kind of the way it's gone in the past. So let's hope the president can be successful. Go ahead.
What's interesting, I hope he does too. But what's interesting, when you look at who Putin is bringing with him, he's bringing their foreign minister. I forget his name. I know his name. And then they're bringing one of their largest business people. He's an oligarch. And it's interesting because the guy with the money is at the table, and they're thinking Trump is going to offer some kind of economic incentives and things like that, which would be a joke, because they'll just take advantage of that and tell us, oh, we're demilitarizing, we're not putting any more troops, we're not going to take any more property. But you can't trust him. And so if he's got a business person there that is one of the oligarchs that is feeling the pain and the pressure, that's when Trump ought to say, you know what, I want this to end. We can do it here, or we're putting sanctions, and I'll get the European Union, as many of them as willing to, is put sanctions on you too. And so that'll be interesting. The other side of this, John, that's going on that a lot of people may not know, is the pressure we're putting on India with the tariffs and things like that tends to be driving them closer to Russia. So you're getting a lot of moving parts here. If Trump does the sanctions there, India will maybe pick up the slack and bring in more Russian oil and products. Not that Russia produces a lot other than agriculture products, fertilizers, and weapons, and oil.
Well, Ted, let's kind of end this on a positive note here. We have a new segment that I've created. I call it the Picture of the Week. Now, Donald Trump, before we put this up, Donald Trump, he's bringing people together, and I call this next picture, and it's Photoshop. Let me let you know that. I call it a MAGA miracle. Can we put that picture up? There you have it. Donald Trump is bringing these two failed late night hosts, and of course radio hosts that are being fired now because of Donald Trump. He's bringing them together. That I just want to put that image in your mind to think about over the weekend.
That's a painful picture.
Well, Ted, I hope
after that.
I wish you, and I know you wish me, tight lines. Let's go fishing. Hope you've enjoyed the show as much as we've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please like what we're doing, share what we're doing. Tune in Monday because we'll certainly be talking about what happens in Alaska later today. Ted, last word to you, sir.
No, I wish that the meeting goes well. I hope good things come out of that. I talk negative about it, but anytime you can have a meeting, I think that's a good thing. Let's just hope there's good resolve and good outcomes out of that. And, tune in Monday because we'll have an update on that, and stay positive about America because we're in our best days that are cranking out better and better.
Peace out.
Have a great weekend. Thank you.